Welcome to Advent Conversations with Good Samaritan Church in Pinellas Park, Florida. Well, Bev and Sue, thank you for being on with me today. So the beginning of Matthew's gospel, it starts by giving this whole lineage that eventually leads us to Jesus. But Luke's gospel starts with a story about this priest whom God silences. Who is Zechariah, and what is his story, and how and why does God silence him?
Well, I did look up. He's in one of these orders of priesthood, and they only serve certain times of the year. And by lot, you're chosen to go into the Holy of Holies and do the sacrifice. And he won the lot that time. And I think that was all planned. And then God had revealed to him that he was going to have a child, and his wife, who was beyond childbearing years, and they were going to have a son, and he was to name him John. And of course, then Zechariah kind of questioned God. You really know what you're talking about. And God says, okay, if you're going to be like that, then just you can't talk till this is over.
I find it interesting. I love names and what names mean. And I looked Zechariah up, and it means God remembers. God has remembered. And I just thought the irony of this, that God has remembered Zechariah, but Zechariah obviously hasn't remembered his God, even though he's a priest, serving in there. And when Gabriel comes to him, as Gabriel did to Mary, Zechariah actually freaks out. He's there with the incense, and this is not part of his plan. This is not what he does at his time, at the office in the temple. And especially when the angel tells him, like Mary, don't be afraid. I heard you. I heard your prayer. How affirming is that? Elizabeth will have a son. You'll name him John, what you said. And not just that, but this kid is going to be fabulous. People rejoice at his birth. He's going to be great. He's so filled with spirit that, like Samson and Samuel, he will not be allowed to drink because he's already high on God. And he'll turn the people to repent and make everybody ready for God. Don't you want this incredible kid? Isn't this what you've been praying about forever? And he just, I think, doubts. I don't know if he doubts himself, and his self-doubt becomes God doubt. Am I really hearing this? Oh no, this couldn't, the practical side, this couldn't happen to me. And it's kind of wonderful because it shows you, even a priest or pastor, we all are continually renewing our faith and having to dig deeper and grow bigger. But
the message from Gabriel to Zechariah is very similar to the message to Mary, and yet this young girl responds with so much more receptivity than this old man does. He's jaded and, really, are you serious, God? I'm having a hard time believing it, and God says, okay, well, you're just going to be quiet then for a while, Zechariah.
Yeah, I find that fascinating, the difference response to the two, or even to Sarah. Similar situation with Sarah and Abraham, right. Old, beyond childbearing years, and Sarah laughed at this thought. Mm-hmm. And I always thought, it depends how you read that passage, but that God sort of chuckled with her. No, you'll find out. But lots tougher on Zechariah, which was interesting to me. And I thought, well, maybe Mary was young, and yes, she seemed to be of a family of faith and so forth, and a woman of faith, but maybe he was treating her more tenderly that way. And here's this guy who's a priest. You're in a leadership role. You've been around, what? But I think about that for me sometimes when I turn God down, or if something comes to me, maybe I should do it. And I don't think it's that much God doubt. Originally, it's more self-doubt. Can I do this? But in essence, that's doubting that God has given me the means to do whatever I need to do. But so I kind of lined up with him. I mean, I felt with him that way.
Isn't that so true? Our self-doubt so often is God doubting
Yeah.
what God can do in and through us.
I love that. I'll give you time to think. You can go to your room now and be quiet for a few months.
Go think about it.
Yeah, go think about this a little bit. But the other thing that came to me today in the car actually was the Shema in Judaism. You know, the key thing when you start so many services and ceremonies is hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one, blessed in the name, you know, and hear how important hearing is, which brings us, I guess, you know, to this COVID listening time. We're really being made to listen. But and I felt kind of sorry for Zechariah in a little bit, because seeing him re-enter society, coming out of the temple where the people were praying, waiting for him. I don't know what he's going to pronounce or something if he's heard, or from his prayer or something uplifting, and he's using sign language, and terribly embarrassing, I would think.
Yeah.
And then going home to his wife also, and this is her dream come true. She's probably been praying for all along,
and he can't even tell her. Yeah.
What?
You know, I've got a nonverbal 7-year-old.
Yeah.
And I know, you know, it's heartbreaking when he so badly wants to communicate something and he just can't. And, you know, and we finally will show us, point us, take us to it, you know. Well, a lot of us have a really hard time with silence, right? And well, frankly, a lot of us have a hard time listening without interrupting. That moment inside the holy place, it's as if God says to Zechariah, okay, hush, I'm speaking, hush, hush. So we've got all women on this conversation today, and I'm going to kind of turn to you for a minute. We know what it's like as women to be hushed or silenced or talked over, interrupted, not given a voice. And there's a part of me that hears this story, and I feel a lot of compassion for Zechariah. It doesn't feel good to be silenced. But there's also this little part of me that's cheering, that imagines God in female form saying, Zechariah, I'm speaking. And when Zechariah doesn't listen to God, God mutes his mic, so to speak. Mutes his mic to make space for God, for God's voice. And also, it turns out, for Elizabeth's voice as well.
Yes.
There's really no way that Elizabeth would have been given the authority to name her son had God not shut Zechariah up. You know, Luke's gospel, more than any other of the gospels, is going to focus on the good news for those on the margins. And this story is our first foretaste of that in his gospel. You really get that sense, don't you? That the story of Jesus, it's not just going to be another patriarchal tale, not just going to be another story dominated by male voices, but it's going to be this story that will give women a voice, that will give all those on the margins a voice. And it'll be this story that makes space for all that God is doing and wants to do, but that the world is presently closed off to. Let's talk for a moment about the power of silence and silencing as a spiritual practice, as a justice practice, as a way of making space for God and making space for those on the margins. How have you seen the power of silence?
You know, one of the things that when you said justice was when we go to the Nehemiah action, and if somebody, one of the authorities that we ask if they will accept our proposal, and if they say no, we give them complete silence.
Give them silence, and we won't give them the mic, right? We take the mic away.
The mic away, and that's it. If they say yes, then it's fine. We applaud. They can say something. But if they say no, then they are silenced and we are silent. And it's powerful. I think
That
it makes them
deafening
very
silence.
uncomfortable. It makes them very uncomfortable. And I think silence makes us very uncomfortable a lot of times, which is good. We need to be uncomfortable sometimes.
I think about some of the most powerful protests back this summer, when all the Black Lives Matter protests were happening all around the nation. And some of the most powerful ones were these silent protests, people laying on the ground as if they had a knee on their neck, people just walking silently through the streets, holding candles. Silence can speak volumes.
I guess this isn't silence because there are words, but Lakewood UCC continued still every Sunday, late afternoon, early evening. They have signs that have been made for Black Lives Matter and quotes of different people, John Lewis or whatever. And they just simply stand outside on the sidewalk every Sunday. They have not stopped. Whereas so much with, I think, the election and political stuff, it's starts to fade. So that, I think that's powerful. This is a challenging topic for me, which I'm sure Bev knows, and you probably already know, is because I'm kind of a talker and that, extrovert kind of thing going on. But also, I think part of it was from growing up, maybe when Bev and I did, and when women didn't have a voice. And I remember almost think of W.B. Du Bois with the inner oppressor of, and I think I was determined to make a difference in some other ways, but I have to work on being quiet. I really do. And what I was thinking, two things. I walk with my dog, my lab, Luke, every day. He's a lab. He's 7 years old, and you'd think he's 4. Energy here, hi, people. And I've had to teach him the command, wait, and he'll wait. And I thought, as I was thinking of today, I need to teach myself, wait. And for me, it's a little harder on the phone not to interrupt people because I don't have the facial thing, knowing when someone's done. And I know you need to not be thinking what you're going to be saying, and sometimes I do because I think I'll forget it. I'm getting old, whatever. But so it's a practice for me to do that. And one week when I was at Good Sam, we gave out little stones, and Bev, I don't remember what they even said on them. Maybe one said, listen, but someone from that congregation who's since moved tells me he still carries that stone in his pocket to remind him. He can just put his hand down there. Okay, wait. So I thank you for this opportunity to remember to be quiet.
I think about, when I was in high school and college, there was that kind of protest of don't ask, don't tell type policies, and people would walk around with duct tape over their mouths, and how powerful that is. But particularly as I've leaned into trying to be an ally and work for justice for others on the margins, I've really learned the importance of taking a back seat and giving the mic over and letting others speak, and kind of making room for that. I remember sitting through so many meetings when the PCUSA was going through their process of deciding whether they would ordain LGBTQ plus folks, and just not feeling like I had a voice at the table, and being really grateful for those who made room for those voices. And usually it involved people being willing to step back and step aside and hand over the mic. I think that's a really powerful way to come alongside and show solidarity with marginalized communities.
I think I shared one other time on a Sunday, but in seminary, going to see the movie Rosewood about the Black community in Florida and the horrible violence. And there were only probably 2 or 3 of us who were white in the whole auditorium. And after the film, they asked for comments, and there was no way no way I could ever have spoken. And powerful stuff that I needed to hear.
And sometimes we just need to listen to the stuff that is really hard or even really good to hear, right?
Yes. Yes.
Zechariah received good news, and yet it was good to be true to him, you know? And I think if someone told me today, hey, you guys are going to be done with pandemic in a week, I don't know that I would believe it. If God sent some messenger to tell me that, I think I'd go, really? We've been in this so long now. Well, speaking of the pandemic, during this pandemic, some of us, especially those of us who live alone, we may feel that we have been forced into silence or solitude. Are there ways that this story could help us see that as a blessing?
I'm not sure. Sometimes I think you have to look back at it later on and realize, oh, yes, if I hadn't been silenced at that time, I hadn't had to stay home and not get involved in things, this wouldn't have happened this way, or I wouldn't have seen these things. But when you're going through it, it's pretty hard to accept.
Yeah.
And I think for Zechariah probably felt the same way. After John was born and he could talk again, I think, oh, yeah, it was pretty good.
Yeah, I think about we'll get to this in a minute, but the brilliant, profound vision that comes out of that silence for Zechariah. And it's kind of like, while John, their child, is in Elizabeth's womb, Zechariah is also in a womb of sorts where he's growing and changing and developing this incredible vision for what God is doing in the world.
Yeah, that's one of the blessings of the COVID for me, is I've taken more time to read, looking at my life, and I think to me this is a time like the Camino was, to when you're walking, sometimes days on end, not seeing anybody, or maybe one or two people, you have time to really think back a lot and to look at life. And sometimes I would think, oh no, why I don't want to think of this, but to try to see it with new eyes and new perspective. Right. And for me at this point, I think, 60s were fun. 70s at first was sort of like, oh, you start thinking about death, more and that sort of thing, or what you want to leave behind. And somehow in this time, I've kind of been reinvigorated to ask, because I'm not just going to movies and dinners, and what calls me now? What brings me joy? I'm rediscovering my poetry. What does God want me to do at this time of my life? How can God use me as someone in an interracial family? What is my role with Black Lives Matter, and how can I do that? And for me, it gives me time with some certain friends. And I find that in this time, somehow we have more time to talk and with my children as well, on some deeper areas, or where we are, or what we're confronting. And it helps me to hear the voices of other generations.
And I think I've had the opposite experience as a mom with young kids. My life was a lot quieter when they went to school for 6 hours a day than it is now. And I find myself just craving that silence, that time when they're all finally in bed and and just be quiet for a little bit. But it's made me realize how much I really need and love those silent times. Well, so Luke doesn't just make reference to the prophets of old. He also talks about those who are contemporary or within one generation of Jesus, who receive this fresh word from the Spirit. So Zechariah is one of them. Does that remind you of a popular UCC saying?
God is still speaking.
God is still speaking. Yeah, we have this wonderful saying in the United Church of Christ: God is still speaking. I wonder how God might be still speaking to us today as we usher Jesus more fully into our world. Do either of you have a sense of that?
Well, I think as a people, for one thing, we are becoming more aware of racial injustices than we were. A lot of people who had never been involved in it at all now are becoming more involved, and I don't think we're going to go back. I think we are going to go ahead. So in that way, God has our attention.
I think we are also realizing how much we're not just individuals living our lives, but especially with right now the ability to spread this virus to one another. I think we're growing in our awareness that we are our brother's keeper, our siblings' keeper, our neighbor's keeper. That we are an interdependent people, and that what one of us does really affects the others.
Yep, that's the growing point right there.
Mm-hmm. And then individually, we don't have all the distractions that we had before. So sometimes we do have to kind of face some of the things we were able to avoid when we were out with other people, or we were out going to social things. And this can be very helpful at times.
Well, thank you both for this rich conversation about Zechariah. Thank you for joining us for Advent Conversations as we continue on the journey of this season.